Hey guys, Ryan Dossey here, and as promised, we're going to get into that deal that almost cost me 100 grand and actually cost a buddy of mine that, if not a little bit more, unfortunately. This has probably been the most frustrating deal of my entire real estate investing career. So, what ended up happening, a buddy of mine got an 8 unit apartment under contract, totally boarded in pretty severe disrepair. Let me actually show you guys the pictures of this thing. So this is the actual property. As you can see, pretty cute on the outside. This is actually in a really, really decent area. Um, this is, a prime example. Look at stuff like this of somebody just running out of money and, deferred maintenance really running rampant. So our total renovation cost on this building was actually going to be like 300 grand. We were pretty much gutting this thing down to the studs and rebuilding it. Problem is we ran into a snag. So one of the guys on our team, about a week before we were supposed to close on this property for $100,000 from the current owner, which is a good friend of mine, said, hey, just double check and make sure that it's zoned for an 8 unit apartment. So we were like, okay, great. Let's do that. So we ended up pulling up zoning, and it was zoned a single family, which is weird. This building is way, way too large to be a single family house. Makes absolutely no sense. It's actually been an apartment complex like literally since the early 1900s. So we ended up reaching out to county and found out that because the previous owner let it sit for about a year without reaching out to county, the zoning actually fell off, dropping it back to a single family. So what we found out is we were going to have to not only petition for a rezone, we were also going to have to try to get variances, one for parking, one for the amount of green space, and then to get it back up to the 8 unit building. So our guys worked on this for, literally, it was probably 80, 100 plus hours over the course of a couple months, multiple meetings with city officials, zoning coordinators, planning coordinators, etc., jumping through all the hoops, really figuring out, hey, what are we going to have to do with this building? And got all the paperwork filed, got everything sent over, and we had our hearing on Monday. So our deal with the current owner was we would actually jump through all these hoops for him. We would try to get it rezoned, and we'd still do the deal if we could get this accomplished. They had to pay like 3 or 4 grand worth of fees for us to get basically to the city council side of things. City council meeting was literally one of the most frustrating things I've sat through. If you haven't done one, they basically give you 15 minutes to sell the floor on the project. And you have to prove that, and the burden of proof lies on you as the potential developer, that the building variances that you're requesting aren't going to be injurious to the public health. Basically it's not going to be an inconvenience for anybody. It's going to be beneficial, etc. So our guys went through kind of their 15-minute pitch, explained, buildings in severe disrepair, has been for decades. We're prepared to invest well over $250,000 into this property, raising local property values, all that good stuff. I actually thought they did a fairly decent job. Several of us showed up to, just kind of show our support and be there. And then members of the community got up, and comically, they were all elderly people, primarily with health issues. The first one who got up was actually a nun, and you're screwed when Sister Catherine is the first one to come up to vote down your project. So her whole thing was she was afraid that we were going to put Section 8 tenants into this building by her house, and those people would bring their people, and she didn't want them in her neighborhood, which, we'll leave alone the fact that a nun didn't want to help the poor. And, we kindly explained this isn't going to be a Section 8 project. We're going to be doing a fairly high-end remodel. And this is going to be honestly more of like a working professional, young single, kind of a luxury development. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, really, really nice place. And she came back and said, well, with her building experience she's had, the foundation couldn't handle the weight of 8 apartments, which our contractor, who's a structural engineer, kindly explained that it's been an 8 unit for 50, 60, 70, 80 years. And there's no structural issues. There's some things that needed shored up, but the foundation was solid. So she thanked him for that. And, we then, next guy comes up and says he's got 3 words and just yelled, "Shut it down," over and over and over again. And it was like, okay, this isn't going well. I get a text from Noah, my number 2, who kind of spearheaded the project. And he said, yeah, I don't get the feeling this is going in our favor. So the first thing we'd petitioned for was a parking variance. Now, in the city's defense and the people's defense that were there, the property has parking for 9, and the code states we needed basically 15 spots, which there wasn't room for on the property. So we were basically asking for a variance of 1 car to apartment, and figuring, if somebody's got an extra car, they can park on the street or whatever. So the problem with that is the local school actually routes their traffic past this building, and it gets really backed up like 3, 4, 5 o'clock. And they were concerned there wasn't room for parking. So it's honestly a pretty valid concern. So the city council voted unanimously on the spot to decline our request for the parking variance. So the problem with that is we still have to meet the parking requirements. So instead of looking at an 8 or 9 unit building, which is what we were looking at, we said, okay, great. So lost that part, absolutely got our teeth kicked in. Super frustrating because you don't really get to address people directly. So people are saying things like, oh, it'll be an eyesore if it's an apartment. And it's like, well, what is it now? If we don't remodel this, what do you think is going to happen with this building? Like, what logic? Like there was no, you can't get into like the logic side of things of what do you actually want done with this? Saying no to this. Okay, great. What would you suggest? Somebody actually suggested we buy the neighbor's property and bulldoze it and put a parking lot there. And one of the guys on the council was kind of like, that's not really how that works. So the next thing, we had to sit through a whole nother, round. They granted other people's petitions to raise the height of their sign by 2 feet for the local church. And the next round we had was to try to get the zoning from single family back to multifamily. So we already knew 8, 9 units was not going to happen, right? So we thought, okay, let's do our best to still try to salvage this deal for us and for our buddy who, this is effectively $100,000 he has on the line, assuming city doesn't condemn it, make him bulldoze it and add all of those costs on top, which they've been trying to do for years. So that was the direction this was likely headed. And unfortunately, it was not a happy ending. So they went and presented and asked if we could make this a 5 unit or even a quad, which we would meet green space requirements. We would meet the parking requirements, like makes perfect sense. Hey, we'll cut the density that was there in half. Good deal for the community, good deal for us. What do you guys think? And there's actually 2 architects on the board that, had other people voice the same thing, hey, I don't think $300,000 is going to remodel this building. And they actually kind of came to our defense and said, yeah, actually that'll go a long way, making this actually look really, really nice. And then everyone voted unanimously to decline our petition for rezoning. So effectively, what my buddy has now is a massive single family house that needs $250,000 to $300,000 worth of work in an area where comps are not going to support it. Nobody's going to buy it. And quite frankly, he's not a developer. He's a wholesaler. He buys and sells. That's it. So I'm not totally sure what he's going to do with this one. Members of his team were there. And, they're kind of looking at it the same way we are, is it's pretty much a $100,000 learning lesson. It's a $100,000 mistake. It's unfortunate. It's something I know they wish they would have checked. I know it's something that we'll be checking on everything we buy going forward. So just because somebody sends you across a deal and says, hey, this is a 5-unit complex, make sure it's zoned for that. Even duplexes, I've seen a lot come across of, hey, this is a duplex and it's actually zoned a single family. So, double check your zoning. I was literally a week away from buying this thing and had a member on our team not suggested I check zoning. We would have bought it and this would have been my learning lesson. Hope that adds value. Guys, as always, do your due diligence. We've actually got a pretty long video on the YouTube channel about that. Feel free to check that out. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks.